CEO on the radio who was doing a podcast and spoke about how one of the goals is to rid the planet of livestock, of farmers. It really seemed very brutal that we should lose our entire living, we should lose our lands, we should lose our farms. Our profit margins are razor thin as it is. I would like to see more due process for farmers and food people, not just our farmers, but other people who are in the food supply chain, you know, small people who are trying to start to produce, people here in the New York City food shed. I would like to see more dialogue like this where we can get a chance to come in and talk about our concerns and say about what is happening in rural New York or rural Pennsylvania. We've had 3 farmers or 3 people in the dairy community commit suicide since the beginning of 2018. Maybe you saw the New York Times article. So I will not be hectored for standing up for my views in terms of what a true dairy product is. I would urge you to incorporate dairy products in your school. It is a nearby food. Dairy farmers really believe in the whole milk as a true nutritious product for students. There was also a beautiful film that was recently produced. It's called Forgotten Farms. It was a film produced by a New York City film producer with a Williams College professor. If any of you know of any venues in New York, I would love to have it shown here in the city. It's been shown around the Northeast, and I really think that it's generated some very good discussions. And sometimes I feel that artistic people are better able to tell your story and better able to portray things than we as boring lawyers who are talking about our legal briefs. And I guess the thing I would like to close with is that as an older farm woman, I have had the opportunity to speak with an author whose name, I don't know if any of you read him, Wendell Berry, and we have talked about a person, so many people live in the cities now, people in the cities becoming, or a certain percentage of people in the cities as urban agrarians, where maybe you don't live on a farm and you don't really know a lot of farmers, but you are cognizant of where your food comes from, the system that is falling into place in this not just this country but globally in terms of food, food production falling in the hands of fewer and fewer people, where you are aware of maybe the signals that are being given to farmers, and that you try to engage. There has been a very dangerous divide. There is like a subcategory of people who are vegans, who are very militant, who have no qualms about threatening people or telling people that their throats will be slit or you will die hanging from a meat hook. Any farmer who goes on Facebook will quickly find that if they are too militant, they will be set by comments like this. So I think that our country is becoming more divided, and it is up to thinking people to try to stem that. And I think a conversation like this is a really good place to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time we'll be taking audience questions, and I just ask that you let us repeat the question so that it can be heard by everybody, and also we're taping. Yes, in the corner.
Yes, with all, to the lady at the end, you spoke passionately about the mislabeling of organic products and things. Just recently today, the New York stock market tumbled because Donald Trump placed tariffs on China. Well, a lot of the places you spoke on, do you think that maybe raising the bar on things like that will stop them from bringing products, sending products over here that's not truly organic?
The U.S. they don't have USDA inspection on site. They kind of rely on third party to do that inspection over there. I don't know if they will stop any of this. I mean, people find ways to cheat on organic all of the time. I don't have a good answer to that other than that I think there should be really good verification of products overseas. I was at the NOFA, New York State Organic Farmers Conference last year, and the dairy farmers were complaining that organic grain was coming in from overseas and they couldn't compete with it. And then lo and behold, the Washington Post did an expose on it. So I think our journalists are really good in terms of alerting people to the possibility of that, and trying to get better third-party verification overseas. But yeah, I don't know what will happen with the tariffs either, because, you know, there could be mass retaliation against export of American food products as well. You know, so the stock market tumbled by 700 points today, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. I don't know if I have answered your question. I don't really have a good answer on that.
It's just really not, there's really not really a definite, genuine answer to that, because just like you said, and just like she said earlier, do these inspections are tainted. I mean,
Yeah, it's like apple, you know, most of the organic
determine
apple juice
why-
comes from
why
China.
not.
So, you know, when most organic apple juice, I saw a chart that someone had done, and, you know, so it's hard to believe that there would be as adequate inspection. When I was going to cheesemaking school, the professor said that she had been to China many times, and the levels of inspection for dairy were so horrific that she couldn't believe it, that they had no concept of a lot of safety things. So they were trying to bring American experts in to try to, you know, encourage safety, or, you know, say in dairy production. But, you know, that was my professor's words, who has been there firsthand and visited farms. So on the organic, you know, say the organic grain, it was even just mislabeling, you know, just somehow a magic wand happens while it's en route, and, you know, it becomes organic by the time it gets here, you know, so. Yeah, no easy answer, but I think the media has brought attention to it, that, you know, what I had heard a year ago at the conference with farmers grumbling, at the Washington Post had come out with a few, you know, I think it was like a month or so ago.
Next question. Yes, Dana.
Okay, I have just something struck me. While I think that it does seem that since for, you know, decades people weren't as worried about cream of wheat or the Goya coconut milk cans or whatnot, and as plant-based alternatives have become more and more popular, clearly they're taking up a share of the marketplace, and this is precipitating some protection of industry, which is totally understandable. But my question then comes to all of your panel, and thank you everyone, this is really fascinating, and I love hearing all the points of view. My question is, what are the potential damages, or what is the fear of what would happen if the labeling remains as is? Because this is what I'm confused about. If people are flocking to some people to plant-based alternatives, and they're becoming more popular, is letting them still be called milk, meaning that some people are buying that just because it's called milk, and if it wasn't, they would go back and buy dairy? Or is potentially everything being called milk keeping almost the dairy in the game? Like, people like all this, and then there's milk. Like, what if it was split? I don't know if the people that are going toward for their own health or ethical or animal, all the reasons that they are environmental, would suddenly switch back, and or wouldn't that then create dairy being more of like, seeming more like, and no, I don't mean this in an offensive way, but like old-fashioned, like sort of like now it's a niche, now it's over there, and this is all called something else. I just wanted to know, like,
Yeah, so maybe it'd be interesting, I don't like have market data, maybe to compare what's happening with Canadian marketing, where they have to use the word drink or make up your own name, you know, what almond breeze or whatever, to American. I will say though that for the Northeast in particular though, fluid milk is the key price setter, and it is the key driver of the success of farms in New York, because our infrastructure was traditionally geared towards fluid, because we are on top of a major marketing area. We are not like California, where they could have massive plants producing powdered milk to go to China, and mozzarella cheese for pizza, whatever that Pizza Hut there, or Domino's. They are, you know, it's a different structure here. So taking away sales from farmers in the Northeast has hit the farmers very hard. I can give you one example. When Elmhurst shut its plant down here, 40 farmers in Orange County got pink slips, and they had nowhere to market their milk. They said, hey, 30 days, goodbye. So I spoke to the Commissioner of Economic Development for Orange County. They were struggling to try to find some other market. Right now in Pennsylvania, 100 farms have been given a pink slip because Dean Food said we can't sell the fluid milk that Walmart has now gotten Walmart has built its own plant in Indiana that will be supplied by large farms in the Midwest. We are now bumping you in Pennsylvania because it'll be a lot cheaper to get the milk there through our own plant. So there are 100 farms in Pennsylvania now desperately trying to find a place to market the milk. So the fluid, you know, the dynamics are different in the different regions. So I mean, I was personally very resentful of some of the vegan websites who celebrated. They said, look, what great success, we are now plant-based 100, and they quoted the guy at Elmhurst, but what they didn't know was that there were, 40 farms in black dirt, Orange County, very rich dirt, who are suddenly now right in your own food shed, scrambling to survive. So what is so great about that? I just don't, so I also can't, I would like to see more honest and appreciation of the food sheds of the Northeast. We are sitting on top of 24 million customers in the greater Northeast corridor. We should be able to find people who truly enjoy dairy products, whether it's a good cheese from the Northeast, or whether it's milk from one of the farms in your region that's fresh and nearby. So there's something lacking, that the image of what you have here in the Northeast is not really known in the cities so much, unless you go out and, unless you're familiar with the rural areas. So that's my point of view. The fluid milk is very important. So yes, if the vegan militants really want to hurt the farmers, then you can take away fluid milk sales, and it's devastating to the people here in this region.
Anything you want to add?
Well, I would add that bring up a good point with the European Union and Canada, where they actually have banned names like soy milk. 2007, I think, was when this actually started. The EU said no dairy terms on anything that's not a dairy product. And then a few years later, they had to go back and say, well, wait, we didn't really mean that, because there's peanut butter and there's coconut cream and coconut milk, and in many languages, almond milk is still allowed to be used because it has such a history. Across the European Union, soy milk is not, you can't use that term. And it is kind of an experiment. Almond milk, even in places where the name is now forbidden, is still taking off, in terms of sales, roughly equivalent to what it's doing here. So as far as we can tell from the kind of limited data we have the past few years, it's not really affecting the shift away. And I also looked at, as part of the petition and kind of for my own personal amusement, Google search data to see what people, even when the European Union changed the names of these products, see what people actually Google. And they still use the same language naturally. They still say soy milk, even though that name is outlawed. So the EU and Canada don't have the First Amendment like we do. We kind of have a stronger free speech tradition that extends also to commercial speech. And that's why I think this kind of experiment will go on, and we'll see, I guess, what happens.
Yes.
Hi. I am in the regulated community. I worked in regulatory affairs for the bulk of my adult life, and I studied clinical nutrition. So I'm really, really happy to hear from the lawyers because we have to pay you a lot of money to get any kind of consultation. And I'm not currently in the GMA right now to have any kind of lobby access. So this is great. One thing that I really wanted to say to you when you mentioned that you felt like artists could better champion your cause, one of my favorite books was written by Kessler, A Question of Intent, and it reads like, I don't know if anyone up there has read it, but it's literally about the beginning of standardizing nutrition panels as a result of flexing the muscle at the FDA went up against tobacco. And it really reads like, I don't know why it's not a movie, other than regulated and regulators are not generally looked upon as being creative. But I think, like the source of the material we're looking at today, times have changed. And you can find a lot of information from, very clinical settings and very creative settings, and of course the marketplace. One of the big differences, I think, between Canada and the US when comparing them, even though they're our closest neighbor, is that their marketplace competition is very different than the United States, where we bolster this sense of get it, like that's the idea. Even in the current administration, that's the goal, is to be as competitive as possible. So the argument kind of undermines the very spirit of what our marketplace does and a lot of our regulations do. You also mentioned something about natural. I'd like to just say the United States natural and Canada natural are also regulated very differently. where they have a much stricter sense for it that wouldn't fly here. In fact, natural guidance is no longer enforceable here. It's not regulated. It was, just written ad hoc, and now it's been rescinded. So it's not even really, we can't even bring out what is natural milk. It's nothing. It's literally nothing. It's not even conventional anymore. It's just a word in a dictionary.
Yeah, because Canada has a totally different approach to their dairy farms. They have a thing called supply management, where each farm has an allotment of how much they can produce, and the prices are set to the dairy farmers. I can drive through Ontario and see really prosperous, lovely farms. I can drive over the border into upstate New York, and you will see right now we have 3 million acres of empty farms where the barns are falling down. There's a study called Green Grass, Green Jobs that Cornell did about this. It's real poverty. Just smashed up towns, barns falling apart, fields grown to weeds, and just, and a lot of hopelessness in those towns that once used to be, associated with strong communities. So Canada has a very different approach. I mean, you just have to drive an hour to see it.
We have different needs, I think, as a people. And on that note too, as far as the needs of people, as far as like 12.860 goes, and standards for how to make milk, those really lived from a place of getting what we thought was good nutrition to people that was subsidized and therefore more accessible for people and readily available in the marketplace. And I mean, if we even look at the nutritional guidelines for food now, dairy products have become very small, removed off the plate and to the side. And so when we compare that type of nutritional standardizing of a plant-based food like milk, just to limit it to our conversation today, so the dairy-based plant alternatives, answers, they don't serve in such a standardized capacity anymore. We know we can get calcium from kale. I hate to say kale because it's blown up, but broccoli. Let's say broccoli. Everybody likes broccoli, right? Except 4-year-olds. But unless they have cheese. We've almost kind of shifted into a position where we're going to regulate too much without some of these just naming standards. I don't imagine we'll go to nutritional standards, but we've already announced that we're going to be merging the FDA and USDA actively, and I think this is predictive of a more label review-like system and less regulation on standard identities. As anyone that's worked in regulation, that's a disaster, that's a nightmare, because in the USDA, only so many things have standards, and so everything in the marketplace, from curry chicken on, that has to get through however many people are seated at the table now without paper clips or, this, and get sent back, and not every industry can afford an in-house regulatory person to get it. The expediter business is dead, and so these arguments to proactively go after other FDA-regulated industry to get them that oversight, it could really backfire for the greater part of our free market here. Is my concern. Even putting vitamin D on the label was a little suspect to me because it is an additive for milk and not in
there was
foods.
a case where someone couldn't qualify as milk because they didn't add the vitamin D.
It's not
a very small producer said we can't afford to buy a gallon of vitamin D is whatever, thousands of dollars to add to the milk, so they had to
But I think
dispute with
those are
them.
voluntary and not added.
Yeah, so I don't know where that was. That case in Florida, maybe.
It was a skim milk case. So when you skim the cream off milk, you take out the vitamin A because it's associated with the fat.
Was that a Florida case, or do you know
That was the
came
Florida
right
case,
now?
yeah. And this is actually a constitutional law case and kind of one of the foundations of our free speech argument. They wanted to sell their natural skim milk without added vitamin A as kind of a natural product that they made on their farm and tell people, yeah, this doesn't have the vitamin A that skim milk has. And the Florida regulators came in and said, no, this is imitation milk and you have to call it imitation milk. So they went to court over that. They sued and they won on a First Amendment argument saying, this product is skim milk. We can inform consumers by saying that there's no vitamin A. It's an absurd intrusion by the state to make us call this an imitation milk product when it's real milk, it's skim milk. And that's what we should be able to call it, and they won that case.
regret that I missed some of the other talks, but my question is, what court cases or actions have been taken related to, say, shelf space or search terms? Because I think those are more important for the shopper to find a product than the words on a label. And I think there's all this focus on the label, and to make a bad pun, that's closing the barn door after the cow's gone.
So you have to buy shelf space, in terms of getting into bigger stores, you have to buy the shelf space. They don't just say, oh, here's some shelf space. There are fees to get on a shelf. So as our food becomes more concentrated and the stores become more concentrated, if you want to get on the shelf in Walmart, you have to pay a fee, and it kind of it makes it harder and harder for smaller farmers or producers to have a shelf space. That is a good point. I mean, I've had vegetable growers who are having trouble getting into Walmart because they're charging a docking fee that in order for you to back your truck up to park to unload, they charge you $150. So if you're going there a couple times a week, it could add up to $1,000, which for a small farmer is very hard. So as we consolidate our food to fewer and fewer major players, some of those, but in search terms, I have no idea. I mean, that was like,
I'm not sure there's any really way to bring a lawsuit over that. I think that's I mean, I really can't think of a theory, and no, I'm not aware of any theory that's been pressed on shelf space or
the description that's used in a, of a product.
like advertising. Yeah.
No, like say I buy most of my non-milks online. I get them in the durable packaging. And so what's on the label is not important to me. What's important to me is that if I put in what I put in for the search, that if I type in milk, I'm going to get all my milks that I want to find. So I'm just wondering, I mean, to me, that would be what you would want to legislate, or not legislate, but argue versus words on a label.
I do see that you have, do you want to have a quick response? Because I do want to get to some other questions.
I had remote, so I cut my teeth in regulatory and remote retail, and we just passed laws for remote retailers now that had never existed before.
What's a remote retailer?
Buying online from a grocery store or food from a grocery store, and that labeling was not really regulated before the menu labeling came out. It's nestled into those rules. But I think what you're talking about is actually added by more creative departments as alternative keywords. So their labeling is still regulated, but you'll find it because the creative department goes in the background and says, oh, people spell vegan with an E, or people say plant milk, or people say nut milk, and those are the keys that you
But
pick
it's
up.
not regulated.
And it wouldn't be, because it's more of a helpful thing and not reflective of the actual product and manufacturer.
I think this would fall in the FTC's jurisdiction over advertising.
Yeah.
It just can't be false or misleading, and
Right. Well, it's like in
the
Germany.
internet in many respects is a wild west in that regard.
In the back.
Hi. First of all, I want to say that as an attorney who's currently studying nutrition and has a public health nutrition background, I'm sympathetic to both of your views. I think dairy plays a very important role, especially lower fat dairy, in the diet of the world. But I also think that the world, especially the United States, does need to transition much more to plant-based foods generally. That said, two questions. First of all, I just wanted to clarify, you kind of hit on this, but did you actually look at the data as to the effects of the labeling, as to whether dairy alternatives, the use of dairy alternatives is affected by the usage of the word milk per se? Does it decrease or increase when milk is used or not used?
Sure. The question is whether I've done a detailed look at the data for whether the naming affects actual sales. I haven't done like a scientific study of this or anything like that. I haven't seen any such studies done. I've just kind of looked generally at the rough trends, and the increased adoption of plant-based products in Europe is roughly the same as the adoption here, regardless of what they're called. That's just kind of a, quick and dirty looking at the graphs, not any kind of rigorous statistical analysis.
Interesting. And in similar vein, notwithstanding the free speech issues, I'm just wondering how both sides would feel if there was kind of a middle ground labeling approach taken such that the use of the word milk would be allowed, but maybe with like some statements, that's clear, again, notwithstanding the free speech issue, clarifying that it's not milk from a cow and that it's a strictly plant-based substitute. I'm just wondering how hypothetically such a middle ground would be.
Notwithstanding the free speech issue, this is something that's really already done in practice, and it's mostly to avoid litigation.
Is it done that?
It usually says prominently, on the front label, non-dairy, along
somewhere,
with other.
but it's not always conspicuous. Again, I'm being very into this stuff myself on a professional and academic level. It varies based on the packaging and based on based on particular products packaging.
Sure, and that may be fair. That may be factual and uncontroversial information that we typically say raises fewer constitutional issues to force producers to put that on the label. It certainly would raise fewer constitutional issues than just banning the term, and I think the plant-based industry would welcome that as an alternative, but I don't speak for all of them.
And what about the dairy industry? Would that be a better
Well, I wasn't a
status
hardliner so much until I listened to the podcast that the CEO of the Good Food Institute last week, and I really became a hardliner. No, I listened to them brag about how cellular agriculture, carefully crafted term stealing the souls of farmers to pretend to be agriculture, is the way of the future. We will eliminate dairy farmers. We will eliminate livestock farms. I mean, it threatens the entire community that every farmer in my area will lose everything they have, and this is to be celebrated. I just don't get into it. And a few death threats to my office after there was an article in the Syracuse paper where people called me and told my secretary to let me know my throat will be slit for selling milk or having a dairy farm, which my secretary is not into food whatsoever. And she's like, somebody's saying your throat's going to be slit. I'm like, so there is this attitude now that the farms are no good, that we're polluters. Every other breath is, if you look on social media, from some of the groups. So I have actually become more of a hardliner.
Yes.
Is there an alternative? I don't know if it's a big enough market, but like the locavore market where people are really into getting products that are local and.
Yeah, it is, but it's so difficult to build your own processing plant. It costs a couple $100,000 to build a plant. I mean, there are very few true farmers who produce cheese, farmstead cheese, because the cost of the plant. Most of the people doing cheese production in the Northeast and the artisan level are actually people who are focused on the cheese end of things. Yeah, so there is. I would love to see more regional brands in the Northeast, but we have such a grip of a few very large bottlers that process like say Dean Foods processes the bulk of the milk. There aren't that many labels. Upstate Niagara produces a milk that they sell in Western New York. There's Hudson Valley Fresh in the Hudson River Valley. There are really good cheese products produced by Cabot Cheese, is a cooperative of about 1,100 farms. So those, but it's really it's war in the marketplace. If you think you're going to go into New York City and sell, you have to be ready to price discount, to fight for shelf space. There was a group of beef farmers in Washington County who was trying to sell in New York City. They were raising grass-fed beef, and they just folded last month. The Fresh Direct said, well, we can get it cheaper from somebody else, so they cut them off, and their whole cooperative just imploded. So.
Doesn't Whole Foods make like a claim that all our stuff is locally
Well, I mean,
sourced?
I don't necessarily think that Whole Foods does. I mean, I was in Whole Foods in Albany, and they had a big display that said local organic milk. So there's this thing called whereismymilkfrom.com. You enter the plant code. So I entered the plant code and all of the milk was from the Midwest. So I went to the manager, I said, what is the meaning of this? And they were like, but all the consumers were really nice people. Were going, we really like to support our local farmers, but they didn't know that if you just look at the plant code on the container, like say plant code 36, you would know it's from New York. And I looked, and there have been times where I've seen plant code 6, which means it's organic milk coming in from California. So, I mean, it's like, what's the point? So, yeah, this is where I think there just needs to be an awareness on the part of urban people. And I like Wendell Berry's theme of the urban agrarian, who was a person who thinks about where their food comes from, whether, I don't care. I mean, I'm opposed to almond milk, but I don't care if people eat almonds and, they're happy with a couple almonds as a snack. But when you add, when you dump it into fluid and then try to call it my product, then I am very opposed, so.
Yes, behind you, yeah.
So thank you to the panel for coming out tonight. I found everything really interesting and educational, especially hearing from more than one perspective. So with the rise or perceived rise of food allergies and intolerances of, say, dairy, since we're talking about milk, how should the regulations reflect that and the availability of a plant-based alternative drink, say, for someone that is unable to consume milk from a cow?
Yeah, if you're lactose intolerant and, you can't drink milk, then, if you choose a plant milk, that's fine. I don't care. I just would like the labeling to be almond drink or whatever. So you go and you drink your almond drink. If you're lactose intolerant, though, there are, as most of the world, there's that other, the Fairlife milk, I think, that has less lactose in it. But globally, this is where fermented foods are, like yogurt or whatever, or good quality cheeses don't have lactose in them, so that's a way to deal with lactose intolerance. But yeah, as far as milk goes, I would never want any kid to have a stomach ache or whatever from drinking milk if that impacted them, but then, choose something that's better for them personally.
Jane.
Yeah, this is so difficult because of environmental issues, which basically small farms. I mean, we all hate the factory farms because of animal welfare issues and because of health and because of human workers who are there. I mean, the small farms, I mean, there are still some animal welfare issues, but they're also the ones who preserve the environment. I mean, you have the farms go out, because I have a house in Vermont. The development moves in. It's developed, and we lose the land. The animals, the wildlife loses the land.
That's so true.
And it's not monolithic. It's like the small dairy farmers with the smaller cows that go out on pasture. It's very different from the commercial farms that do pollute and
So when Massachusetts has lost so many dairy farms and livestock farms that their grassland bird species are crashing. Yeah. Literally down by 99% in some of the species. In my own neighborhood, every time a dairy farm falls, it's quickly cannibalized for sprawl. I watched them a development down the road from our farm plow under the fledglings in the spring.